Big 12 championship scenarios. I can't give them all to you. There are 256. But I do know from BYU to Colorado to even Baylor, I can give you the scenarios that will get these teams in. It's not easy. It's very complicated. Bear with me. If your favorite team is in that 8, I'm going to bring them up here and tell you how they can get in. Greg Wrubel, who is the voice of the BYU Cougars, tweets BYU's path to the Big 12 title game is a win against Houston and a Kansas State win at Iowa State or an Arizona win against Arizona State. So the goal for BYU, if you're a BYU fan, you win your game this week, you take care of business. And in the 2 games prior, in those time slots prior, you're a massive K-State fan. You're a massive Arizona fan. Change your Twitter bio picture now, or your what is it called, profile picture now, to one of those 2 teams. That's who you're rooting for alongside the Cougars this week. I had to go to Reddit to get the rest of the playoff scenarios. Colorado, according to Reddit, clinches a Big 12 title game berth with a win plus Iowa State loss, plus Arizona State loss. So if you're Colorado, you're also rooting for Iowa State to lose to Kansas State this week, for Arizona State to lose to Arizona. In a scenario where Colorado wins and BYU wins, Iowa State loses, and Arizona State loses, say hello. We have a Big 12 championship between Colorado and BYU as we were promised 3 weeks ago. That would be awesome. Or Colorado could get in with a win and an Iowa State loss and a BYU loss to Houston. That would mean that we're down to 2 7-2 teams, Colorado and Arizona State. Or Colorado gets in if they win. In all these scenarios, these teams are going to need to win. Plus an Arizona State loss, plus a BYU loss. So if you're a Colorado fan, you change your profile picture, rooting this week for Kansas State and rooting for Arizona and even rooting for Houston. If all 3 of those teams lose, hey, all good. You're in. Win your game, take care of your business. Hope the other teams that are at that 2-loss category fold. Arizona State clinches a Big 12 title game with a win, plus an Iowa State loss, plus a BYU loss. You could also clinch with a win and a BYU loss and a Colorado loss. Arizona State's is kind of convoluted. You're gonna be rooting hard for Kansas State. You're rooting hard for Houston. You're going to want BYU to lose. And you hold the head-to-head against BYU. So that's going to put you in a good spot. But the problem could be is what if we somehow, some way get tied in here for another team that BYU has beaten and now we sit at there are some question marks for Arizona State. You still don't control your own destiny, even with a win. I already mentioned that BYU. Let's go here. Iowa State. You need to win. You need Arizona State and BYU to lose. That is one scenario in which Iowa State gets in. So we're big fans this week of Arizona, and we're big fans of Houston if you're an Iowa State fan. Iowa State. You could win your game. Arizona beats Arizona State, and Colorado loses this week. In that scenario, you would get in. So you're rooting for a Colorado loss, and simultaneously, you're trying to get that Arizona State loss here. A lot of teams are counting on Arizona State to lose. So just take care of business and then hope that Oklahoma State pulls a miracle against Colorado. That's on the table. Last chance for Iowa State is with a win and a BYU loss and a Colorado loss. Will BYU lose to Houston on the same week Colorado loses to Oklahoma State? Honestly, yeah, it's possible. Like crazier stuff's happening in the Big 12. I'm not going to say never. Kansas State. You could go to the Big 12 title. Win, BYU loss, Arizona State loss, Baylor loss. You're in. That's all it would take. BYU loses to Houston. Arizona State loses to Arizona. Unlikely. Baylor loses this week. And in that realm, Baylor loses to Kansas. In that realm, you're in. Or BYU loses, Colorado loses, and Baylor loses. Those 3 occur. Congrats, Kansas State, I should say. You're in. I put your hats on. You're rooting for Kansas this week hard. You need a Baylor loss. You're rooting for Oklahoma State hard. I'd say the most likely of those is BYU losing to Houston, Arizona State losing to Arizona, and Baylor losing to Kansas. K-State's rooting for Kansas very hard this week, as well as the Cougars of Houston and the Wildcats of Arizona. Texas Tech. Tech with a win, plus a BYU loss, plus an Iowa State loss, plus a Colorado loss, plus an Arizona State loss. All of the 2-loss teams in this conference fall this weekend, and Texas Tech wins, and you're not just maybe in, you have clinched a Big 12 championship berth. I don't know how that we got here, but you're in. The 2-loss teams lose, and they all fall to 3-loss squads. Texas Tech is in. Baylor also somehow here. If you win, okay? If you win, you can go to the Big 12 championship game. You beat Kansas. BYU loses to Houston. Iowa State loses to Kansas State. Arizona State, they lose their game to Arizona. And according to Reddit, Baylor clinches a Big 12 title game berth. No matter what, the Bears can say we were alive on rivalry weekend with a chance to go to the Big 12 championship game. Somehow, Baylor could also get in with a win, a Colorado loss to Oklahoma State, very unlikely, an Iowa State loss, and an Arizona State loss. At that point, there's a good chance we get BYU and Baylor. A lot of God in that one, playing in Arlington. I'm not done. West Virginia. Mountain Mama. Fire Neil Brown is in the Big 12 championship game. With a win, a Baylor loss, a BYU loss, a Colorado loss, and an Arizona State loss. At which point, it's likely West Virginia, Iowa State. I don't know how any of this makes sense. And if I had to break down the tiebreaker, I don't even know how I would start. But this is the world that we live in. This is the Big 12 world that we live in. Arizona State, you're close, but you don't control your own destiny. BYU, you're still close, but you don't control your own destiny. And there are so many ways in which like a Baylor wins or even a BYU wins, and they still don't get in. That is the chaos. That is the madness. That is the absolute wild scenario the Big 12 has gotten itself in. It's like everybody else in the country got to figure it out. The SEC, they kind of know it's going to be Georgia and somebody, SMU and somebody in the ACC, Ohio State and Oregon are likely going to face off in the Big 10. The Big 12, grab a beer and then try to do the math. I'm going to go take a hot bath. I don't even know. I get that. My brain's gone. That broke my brain. Loss, win. With a win, you get in and they get in. And this is not, I did not take math in college. This has been, it always will be. Come back tomorrow for more football talk, I think, is what we'll be doing. Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.